Imagine you're 558 feet underwater, in total darkness, inside a flooded cave in rural China. And the rope that is supposed to guide you back to the surface is gone. You can't see anything, your mind is starting to slip, and your best friend, the person you've trusted with your life for years, is not responding. This is not a hypothetical. This actually happened. And in the next 17 minutes, I'm going to tell you exactly what went wrong, why it went wrong, what the survivor discovered when he finally had time to think about it. Stay with me, because the story gets a lot worse before it makes any sense. Sejimiti Tunzi, TCTI on April 18, 2014, two best friends, Wang Yuan and Wang Tao, showed up to a cave they had visited many times before. The cave is called Jiudan Cave, and it sits in China's Guangxi Zhuang region, specifically in Duan County, an area that's essentially the caving capital of the world. Thousands of miles of underground and underwater cave systems run beneath this remote part of China. Fewer than 1 million people live spread across the entire county. But adventurers from all over the world make the trip just to explore what's underneath it. And when Yuan and Tao first discovered Jiudan Cave, they were immediately hooked. It's not just another flooded tunnel. Inside, there are stunning rock formations, plant life, and a massive interconnected network of passageways. There's a north entrance and a south entrance, each leading to different parts of the cave system. By 2014, both men had already completed 15 dives at the north entrance alone. So they knew this place, they loved this place. And that familiarity, as we'll see, may have been part of the problem. CG Men 3 THEWRs. Now, before we get into what happened that day, you need to understand who these men were. Because this was not a case of inexperienced divers getting in over their heads. Wang Yuan had more than 400 dives under his belt. That is a significant number in the world of cave diving, where a single mistake can be fatal. Wang Tao had completed over 200 dives himself. Between them, they had explored caves in multiple countries. These were not reckless people. These were careful, experienced, and deeply passionate divers who had spent years building up their skills. But on April 18, 2014, they decided to attempt something neither of them had done before. Their plan was to descend to 558 feet, or 170 meters, inside Jiudan Cave's north entrance. For context, their previous personal record was 400 feet, or 122 meters. They were planning to go 160 feet deeper than they had ever gone before. And not only that, they planned to extend the existing guide rope another 33 feet beyond where it currently ended. That means at the very deepest point of their dive, they would be off the guide rope entirely. In cave diving, that rope is your lifeline. It is literally the thing that brings you home. Seamen 4 THEPLINI, to their credit, Yuan and Tao did not walk into this casually. They spent months planning this dive, and the level of detail they went into was serious. Here's why the planning had to be so precise. When you dive to the depths they were targeting, the air we normally breathe stops being safe. Most of the air at sea level is nitrogen, which is fine to breathe at shallow depths. But the deeper you go, the more pressure builds and nitrogen starts entering your bloodstream faster than your body can absorb it. Past about 100 feet, this creates a narcotic effect. Divers describe it as being intoxicated underwater. Not great when you're navigating a dark, flooded cave. To deal with this, deep divers use gas mixtures with less nitrogen. But here's the complication: past about 217 feet, oxygen itself starts becoming toxic. So divers replace some of that oxygen with helium, which is inert and doesn't cause those effects. However, and this is important, breathing too much helium at extreme depths can trigger a condition called high-pressure nervous syndrome, or HPNS. Symptoms include tremors, involuntary shaking, drowsiness, and irregular heart rhythms. Getting the right gas mixture at every depth is not optional. It is the difference between making it home and not. Yuan actually traveled to meet French cave diving legend Pascal Bernays, one of the deepest divers in the world, specifically to get help designing the decompression plan. He then went to the Philippines to complete a practice dive close to 500 feet in open water, just so he and Tao would have some experience near that depth before attempting it inside a cave. Tao couldn't make it to the Philippines because of his work schedule, so Yuan went alone. The practice dive went smoothly. On April 17th, the day before the big dive, Yao and their support diver Joe Pei arrived at Jiudan Cave to stage more than 20 gas cylinders at various depths throughout the cave. Every tank, every mixture, every position, all planned in advance. On paper, they had thought of everything. Sejiment 50, THD Vaginas, April 18th, the day of the dive. Yuan and Tao entered the water and began their descent. They passed through the familiar upper sections of the cave and pushed steadily deeper. Their support diver Joe Pei followed them partway before stopping at his assigned depth to wait for their return. Everything was going according to plan. At around 475 feet, Yuan glanced at Tao and could see that he was struggling. The depth, the pressure, the gas, all of it was hitting him harder than they expected. But Tao signaled that he was okay, and they continued. They reached the end of the guide rope at 525 feet, extended it another 30 feet as planned, and began their ascent. That's when everything changed. Sejiman Sichirap eyes Gyang as they made their way back toward the main guide rope. They couldn't find it. Somewhere in the confusion of the deep, in the disorienting darkness of a flooded cave at 500 plus feet, the permanent guide rope, their lifeline, was no longer where it was supposed to be. It had broken. Let that sit for a second. You are in total darkness. You are more than 500 feet underwater inside a cave. You are breathing a carefully calculated gas mixture that is already starting to affect your thinking. And the rope that is supposed to lead you back to the surface is gone. According to Yuan, neither of them panicked outright. They didn't become frantic, but both of them were absolutely terrified, and their breathing, already elevated from the exertion, spiked even further. After an agonizing search, Yuan located the rope, they reconnected with it and began ascending. But both men had burned through significantly more gas than planned. Their hearts were pounding, their minds were clouded, and they still had hundreds of feet to climb. Sejimenta 70 runs out off AIR at around 300 feet. Tao signaled to Yuan that his gas supply was critically low. Yuan responded immediately and gave Tao his own secondary regulator, allowing Tao to breathe from Yuan's tanks. But Yuan's tanks were also nearly empty. This only bought Tao a small amount of time. Here is where one of the most heartbreaking details of this entire story comes in. When investigators later recovered Tao's equipment, they discovered that his second tank, the one mounted on his back, still had enough gas in it to get him to the next set of stage tanks. He wasn't actually out of air, but at that depth, in that state of physical and mental deterioration, he simply forgot to switch to it. He forgot. The carbon dioxide built up rapidly in his body. He lost consciousness. And by the time Yuan realized what was happening, Tao was unresponsive. What happened next is one of the most desperate and painful sequences I've ever researched for this channel. Yuan searched for Tao. He shone his light in every direction. He tried to relocate him, but his own condition was deteriorating fast. He was running out of air himself. He was dizzy. His thinking was muddy. He descended back toward Tao's last known position, nearly reaching 300 feet again. Nothing. No sign of his best friend. He switched to stage tanks that weren't intended for his current depth, another risk on top of everything else. He kept searching. And then, for a brief moment, Yuan lost consciousness too. He woke up seconds later. And in that moment, something clicked. He knew that if he didn't start ascending right now, he wasn't going to make it out either. He began to climb. The required decompression stops on the way up. The carefully planned pauses at specific depths designed to let the gas safely leave your body. He could barely force himself to follow. Every second felt unbearable. His body was fighting him. The panic was overwhelming, but he kept going. GMNT9. Raye Kantishas UFC support diver Joe Pei was waiting just below the surface when he suddenly saw a light appear out of nowhere just a few feet away. It was alone. When Yuan communicated that Tao was gone, Pei was immediately overcome with disbelief and horror. In a moment of raw panic, Pei actually screamed at Yuan while they were still underwater, before catching himself and realizing Yuan was still in critical condition and needed help. Together, they made it to the surface. What should have been nearly 4 hours of decompression stops had been compressed to less than 3. Yuan's legs were in excruciating pain. His dizziness was debilitating. He was vomiting by the time he broke the surface. Emergency services were already on the way. He was carried out of the water and placed directly into an ambulance. Pei went back in to assist the rescue divers who were now arriving, but because of the complexity of planning the gas mixtures required to safely reach Tao's depth, the recovery effort had to be delayed until the following morning. On April 19th, divers located Tao's body at 167 feet. An hour later, he was brought back to the surface. Yuan spent several days inside a decompression chamber recovering. He made a full physical recovery. But during those days in the chamber, he had nothing to do but think. When he was done, he had written out a complete list of every error and oversight that he believed contributed to Tao's death. Not to assign blame, but because he felt he owed it to his friend to understand what actually happened. His conclusion was sobering. The dive plan they had worked on for months was flawed from the start, and it all came down to one root cause: overconfidence. They were experienced divers, yes, but their plan targeted a depth that was dramatically beyond anything either of them had done before. At 500 plus feet, every single foot matters. Pressure affects people differently. Gas mixtures reduce the risk of narcosis and oxygen toxicity, but they don't eliminate it. Both men were already experiencing extreme fatigue and impaired judgment before the rope even broke. And when the rope broke, there was simply no margin left. The breaking of that guide rope was the final variable that turned a difficult situation into a fatal one. But the conditions that made it fatal had been building since before they even entered the water. There's one last thing Yuan said that I think about a lot. He believes that Tao saved his life in his final moments. When Tao signaled that he was running low on gas and started breathing calmly from Yuan's secondary regulator, he did so without panicking. He didn't thrash, he didn't grab. He communicated and he stayed calm. Yuan believes that if Tao had panicked in that moment, neither of them would have ever made it out of Jiudan Cave. Tao died because of a compounding series of errors, some made weeks in advance, some made in the chaos of the moment. But in his very last moments, he made one decision that was exactly right, and that decision came home. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I want to thank all of you for your incredible story suggestions. Since I first mentioned it was getting harder to find cave stories, I've received so many excellent ones. It seems there are still plenty of obscure cases from countries around the world that aren't easily searchable, often because all the sources are in different languages. So if you're not from North America and you know of a local story from your home country, I genuinely love to hear it. And a huge thank you to Babbel for sponsoring today's video. If you want to check them out, the link is in the description below. They're offering 60% off a subscription for scary, interesting viewers, and it comes with a 20-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk at all. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.